Hello, everyone, and welcome. I'm Tony, and that's Tony times two. And tonight I am here with Operation Restoration 2020. It is our third virtual live session with a three-part session of Who is Jade Simmons. Tonight we'll be talking to the independent presidential candidate, Jade Simmons. Jade lives as she leads. And since she's always has led industries and individuals to live out their most bold and audacious self, she's doing the very same. Jade has been quoted as saying, if you continue to see a void, you must ask yourself, have you been called to fill that void? Join me in welcoming our next president, Miss Jade Simmons.
Hey,
Hello.
thank you so much for doing this.
Yes, of course. So let's just get right to it. Why independent candidate? Why now? Why 2020?
Oh, you just dove right in.
Yes, let's get to
it. Listen, we always feel like we've answered that question, and we find out it's never going to be one that's done with being answered. And when people say, why did you wait so late? Timing is everything. But we believe this is not late. We believe this is right on time. We've actually been running since February officially.
Okay.
And so we've been here a few months. But what's happening is you're not seeing us in some of the places you would expect to see us. And we look forward to that changing soon. But we've been here. And the reason that we believe now is the time is because this is a time where we believe people are starting. They are starting to say, looking at these two options, and it's not even a matter of whether they like the two options. It's they can't imagine either of those options leading us through this moment right now. So we're finding more momentum, more traction, more curiosity, and more people seeing viability in my candidacy now. The other side of that, why as an independent, it's important to me. I think it's going to be most important to the American people moving forward that they know they can trust the person in office, not just to be working for one side. We have a current incumbent who has been unapologetic about working for a small demographic. And I think the flip side of that is because we've seen that, we can't imagine a president coming in and saying, I work for everybody. And so it's been important to me not to be aligned politically to one party or the other so that I could realistically say, I'm coming to everybody, as Shirley Chisholm used to say, unbought and unbossed, no strings attached, completely unaffiliated. Does that make it much harder to run? 100 times harder. But I think it makes my case for credibility much stronger because when I'm in office, you don't have to wonder if I'm playing to a base. You don't have to wonder if I have a secret agenda or if I'm making decisions based on re-election. So I believe, re-election should always be up to the people. It's not about maneuvering. And so it's an exciting time to run. I feel like the time is right now. And I feel like coming in as an independent is really the only way to do this.
Okay. So since you don't have any party affiliation, how do you propose to work with both sides of the aisles with no party affiliation?
Yeah, I think the best thing now is, we've been talking about working across the aisle for a long time. And the problem with that is it's not politically convenient to do it. And so the reason you haven't seen bipartisanship is not because it doesn't exist, because you'll find out that some of these people that we see pretending to go to battle on screen are out there having lunch with each other behind the scenes. And so what's happening is it's more politically expedient to sensationalize the division because it keeps voters on one side or the other. American politics right now doesn't want you to know that people have more common ground than you think, because then they don't have any sway over you. They can't own your vote. They can't scare you into voting one way or the other. So what excites me is to be able to not work across the aisle, but to live in the aisle. Nobody has loyalty. There's no loyalty, no pledge to me. And I also don't have any pledge to one side or the other. So one of the things that we're talking about is we were asked this question yesterday in a Meet the Candidate, a private event with voters. And the way that I see it is a large part of my role will be to expose the polarization that is existing now for the profit of politicians. So you're going to see one of the most transparent presidencies because I don't have to play certain games. Now, what I get to do is look for legislation and help build legislation that serves more American people than ever before. So one of the things you'll see me asking for and requiring is that stuff that comes through has to come through with bipartisan buy-in in the beginning. So you'll see now, why do you have somebody, I see Mighty O is asking about criminal justice reform. Right. Why are both parties creating their own separate bill? It's because they know they've got stuff in it that's going to disallow the other side to pass it. So what we're watching now is fake politics. You're watching performance art. Neither side has any intention of getting their bills through, but they need to pretend to their people, look how I'm fighting for you. We're not making any compromise. Both sides are saying that. It looks good. It makes good theater. The problem is, meanwhile, there's no reform. Meanwhile, there's no change. Meanwhile, people are still dying. So you have to have someone who comes in and calls BS, quite frankly, on a lot of the systems that exist. You have to have someone who is not beholden to lobbyists as well. So it's not going to be easy, but I think the only way it gets done is you have a president that's not tied to one side or the other. No one has control over her.
Okay, so we do have someone in the comments asking the question, and he was very early, 7:31. He was ready with his question. So we have Mighty O. His question is, what are your specific plans for the Black community as far as socio-economic and criminal justice reform?
Yeah, first of all, I love that he put in their specific plans. Mighty O, I won't have time to go over all of them. So I will tell whoever's watching now that when you go to our website, www.operationrestoration2020.com, scroll down, you click on the pro-human tab. When you click that, you're going to see plans that are called Shades of Breakthrough, and you're going to see Breakthrough for Black America. I say that unapologetically because it is time now for a president not only to be president to all, but to admit that there have been long-held specific systemic injustice done to specific people. So I'm unapologetically putting out plans that are specifically geared towards Black America. You'll also see plans that come geared towards Native Americans, immigrants, small business owners, farmers, because we believe it's time now to target individual groups that have been targeted. So these groups that have been targeted by systemic injustice now need to have systematic success built in. So I talk very boldly about a new Breakthrough for Black America plan. It's kind of a new version of the Marshall Plan. We went over to Europe and spent billions of dollars helping them after the devastation of the war. We should now invest into our own communities from the devastation of systemic racism and systemic injustice. So you're going to see plans there that focus first on education, because my concern right now is that because all of the attention is on criminal justice reform and police brutality, we won't get around to what you're talking about, Mighty O, which is the socioeconomic injustices. So I actually start with the educational reforms that I want to make related to systemic injustice. Some of those include as simple as reforming the Head Start program. We've talked a lot about that. Tony, we've talked about increasing awareness for vocational programs. That's something that has been stigmatized, and now we have kids coming out of school unable to use their hands and to work powerfully. Talking about reforming the educational system in general so that we're now teaching from a more entrepreneurial mindset, but specific to Black America. We're talking about new entrepreneurial charter schools in underserved communities. We're talking about increases in things like funding for housing, funding for businesses, small businesses. Right now, the way that the language is, everything's general. It's geared toward minorities, or it's geared toward women and minorities. We need plans that are specifically geared toward Black business owners, Black homeowners. So you'll see me say that unapologetically because the system has unapologetically disadvantaged that group of people. You also hear me talking about fully endowing HBCUs as well in terms of criminal justice reform. There are a couple of areas there that we need to work with. You've got to get rid of qualified immunity if you're at all serious about having a discussion that's really going to equal justice for more people. A Department of Justice under me would serve as a watchdog specifically. We'd reinstate a program, I think that President Trump really voided after President Obama, which focused on civil rights specifically with the Department of Justice. I also believe we need to go back and look at cases that I believe did not receive justice. So I don't think we have the luxury of just moving from a clean slate forward, because this has been going on way before George Floyd. So I think we now have to look at reopening cases where we know justice was not served. So look, it's a plan that disrupts. I have friends who are non-Black who are concerned. Hey, wait a minute. Why are you focusing on Black America? Aren't you going to be a president to all? Of course I am. But we can no longer deny certain things have disadvantaged Black people more. And we also can't waste this moment, Tony, where we have universal buy-in for once. We have universal buy-in. And what I don't want to do is waste all of our time on symbolic reform. Getting the statues down is great. Getting Aunt Jemima off the shelf is great. But that's not the stuff that's going to feed back into us for generations forward to undo the damage that has been done for generations past.
Yeah, I agree. So with that being said, we know that you're a woman of God and you're a minister of the word. So how is your candidacy being received by the Christian community? And you just mentioned a little bit about the Black community, but how's it being received overall?
All right, so we're 10 minutes in, 11 minutes in. I believe in keeping it as real as possible, from as early as possible. We had people who assumed because I was so openly a person of faith and have on purpose intentionally spoken about my faith. Let me just say the reason I've done that is because I believe we need another example of what it looks like to be a faith-based leader. I think we have a current leader who has manipulated faith. I think we have a current faith-based community who has allowed religion to be manipulated in service to attaining power or to winning certain political battles. I don't believe that that's how faith is supposed to be represented. So I'm speaking openly as a Christian, not because I believe everybody should be a Christian, because I'm trying to proselytize everybody, but because I believe that there's a whole different representation of what it means to lead from my place of faith. And to me, my faith dictates to me how I serve people, whether or not they believe like me. The scripture that I believe in dictates how I serve people. It also dictates how I behave towards people, especially those that don't look like me, don't believe like me, don't walk out life like I do. And so I run openly with my faith so that people can see the contrast. How has it been received? Well, the funny thing is we're received better by non-Christians in many ways sometimes than we are by people who also believe. I think people have forgotten that your faith is not the same thing as patriotism, that worshiping God is not the same thing as worshiping a person who holds a political office. So we have seen pushback from people who have elevated a man higher than they've elevated necessarily the word of God or the principles of scripture. So people who have decided that to be Republican, let's say, means to be Christian, they can't hear what I'm saying because I don't claim to be Republican. That being said, we have Democrats who accuse me of being Republican because I speak openly on faith. We have Republicans who accuse me of being a Democrat simply because I'm Black and I'm female or I dare to speak out about systemic racism. So people are having a hard time pinning me down. In the Black community, we've seen a lot of support from the younger Black community, specifically those who are interested in things like Black Lives Matter, not necessarily the movement, but just the cause itself. We've seen traction among people who are looking for a president who dares to call out inequality in terms of the economy. I talk a lot about creating a more humane economy that works for more people. So we're seeing people who care about the environment latching on to what we're talking about, because I believe we should be good stewards of the environment. So, we're seeing support from unexpected places, and the places we expected support, for instance, Black people who are very much aligned with the Democratic Party, who have voted Democrat their whole life, say it's very difficult for them to look at me as a serious option. They consider me to be someone who's splitting the vote. And so I know we'll get into that later, but so we've had a mixed response, but the wonderful development is that more people than we thought are loving the message. People we didn't expect. So right now in New Mexico, where we were just recently, we had everybody from conservative Christians to disgruntled Bernie bros to middle of the road independents, all working the streets for us in terms of getting signatures because they heard something different. And most importantly, they saw a leader who would be determined to serve them before I serve politics, personal agenda, or profit anytime. So that's been really encouraging to see.
So you mentioned New Mexico. So you recently had a project there where we were trying to obtain signatures. So there are a lot of people want to know how you're going to get on the ballot for 2020 presidency. You wasn't on the primaries. But then at the same time, you have that project going when you were in New Mexico, and then you have 7 more states to visit. So kind of touch on that and explain to us what that means.
Yes. So listen. So much of our heavy lift is not even the win. It's the political education. And I raise my hand first and say, I did not understand the Electoral College like I understand it now. I did not understand ballot access. I knew about voter suppression. I didn't know about candidate suppression, which is a real thing that I hope we have time to get to. Here's the thing. I am legitimate as they come. 41 states, you can already vote for me. In those 41 states, we are running as a registered write-in. Listen, that's not the same as writing in Mickey Mouse, writing in your grandma. It's not even the same as writing in Bernie Sanders. A lot of Bernie supporters have been saying, we're just going to write him in. Well, that vote would literally be a wasted vote, not because Bernie's a bad guy, but because he's not registered in each state to be a write-in. He is an independent or registered as a Democrat. Also, there's a sore loser law. So once he has already exited the race, he can't now run with another party or even as an independent. And so I run as a registered write-in, 41 states. I could sit back on my laurels right now, wait until November and pray that we win all 41, and I'll see you in the White House come January. We're not resting on our laurels. There are 9 states that do not allow write-in status. And even in the midst of COVID, Tony, they are still requiring us to go out and collect signatures. So in New Mexico, we had to go there to collect signatures. We'll head to South Carolina to collect signatures. If you're listening in you're from SC, that's my home state. I'm a Charleston girl. We'll be back there to collect signatures. In those 8 states, we have to get on the ballot. And that way you'll go in the poll and you'll see Donald J. Trump, Joe Biden, and Jade Simmons. You'll be able to, check that off. In those other 41 states, you'll see a blank line. You write my name in, 2 M's in Simmons, and that vote will count for me. Now, here's what's wild. Even after that, I get to participate in the Electoral College. So what we're doing now is lining up our electors. We get to select our own electors. We have 5 electors in New Mexico. We want to talk about diversity. We've got a Hispanic woman, a Native American guy from the Seneca tribe, a Black woman who is now denouncing her Democrat status. We have a Republican Christian pastor who's one of our alternates there. I mean, we run the gamut, and we have one lady who would have been more so for Bernie Sanders had he stayed in the race. So you will never see the diversity that we have collected, the thousands of signatures we got in New Mexico. The diversity of that group gave us hope, because that's a group that splits the Democrats and the Republicans in half. Oh, wow. So people were worried I'm going to split the vote. I always say, well, which side are you worried about? Because you might be happy when you find out which side I'm splitting, right? So we're seeing potential to split a lot of different seemingly monolithic groups, and we're finding out that people are not monolithic. They want something different. So we're legitimate. You won't see me on a primary ballot because I'm not running for a party. There are, I think, 2 states that allow independents on a primary, but that's why you won't see me. It doesn't mean that I'm not in the race. I'll be in the race in November, which is the most important place. Plug. Make sure you're registered to vote. There will be some tricks. There will be some fishy stuff going on already starting now. There are lawsuits already pending to keep you from being able to vote the way you want to vote. So we're telling people now, get registered yesterday, so nobody, turns you away come October, and make it before October so that if you want to do early voting, you're registered as well.
All right. Awesome. So you did mention we're having a campaign in the midst of this pandemic that we had.
Yeah.
So we recently had a research. The numbers are climbing up again. So how is that going to affect your campaign, and how does that affect like your first 90 days, first 100 days in office when you win, when you are our president of the United States?
Mhm.
So how is that going to affect that?
So, loaded question. That first part, we are greatly affected by this. Had COVID not hit, we would have been gathering signatures back in March. We would have had months versus 1 week suddenly to get thousands of signatures. So New Mexico, they actually listened to the shutdown. They were mostly still shut down. Everybody's wearing their masks. Nobody's in the parks. We were blessed with having two events that they had there for Juneteenth that we were able to kind of camp outside that event to get signatures. So we're coming to, and somebody can put this in the comments, we're coming to South Carolina next. Oklahoma is a state we have to get on the ballot in, Hawaii, Arkansas, Mississippi. I think there's a few more I know I'm missing, also New Mexico. And we have to go to these places even in the midst of COVID-19. Some states are doing a wonderful thing, and they are either eliminating the signature process altogether and allowing independents to be on the ballot, or they are drastically reducing the amount of signatures by, making it like 50% of the original numbers. But the states that unfortunately we have to focus on have not made adjustments. And so it's literally we're having to put ourselves in harm's way and hope that we're not putting others in harm's way in order to get on the ballot. You talk about candidate suppression. We are seeing media outlets refusing to cover us, especially left-leaning ones, because they're saying, hey, you're going to mess up our strategy. We're trying to get Joe in the White House. Well, the media is not supposed to be on any candidate's side. And they're admitting it, or they're saying we don't cover independents. So those of you watching, hit up your news stations and say, we know there's another option out there. Why aren't you bringing her to us? So in South Carolina, my home state, we are expecting the media to play right and to have me on the air, which we really suggest they do, or it's going to get a little bit noisy, because we need to now be demanding not just that voters are able to vote, but that they have all the candidates in front of them. Your other question about what I would do in the White House. Well, those first 100 days must be determined by what's happening in the nation. It cannot be a vanity show. It cannot be me trying to push through a bunch of stuff just so I look more effective than all the presidents who came before me. I said this last week. There are three main factors, so I won't go into it deeply now since I've covered it, but it depends. If we are still in a place where containing the spread needs to be the focus, that's what you'll hear me talking about. You would hear me talking about something I've been talking about now for a couple months, ongoing emergency preparation. Once again, we're caught with our pants down. We haven't re-upped where our PPEs are concerned. Our frontline workers haven't gotten any rest. We haven't talked about the mental health pandemic that is now about to strike, because you have people who recovered who will have PTSD from COVID-19. That's not me prophesying doom. That's scientific proof based on the recovery from other epidemics, what has happened to people. So you're looking at people that are going to now have an increased need for mental health services. We have not restored and revitalized those things. We had to go to China and Mexico to get emergency equipment. Why? Because our companies are still manufacturing abroad. So if we are through the spread, if we are now actually in recovery, then those first 100 days would be focused on jobs, which are going to have to be no matter what is going on. I think we're going to have to look at government-funded jobs. We're going to have to pay people to be out there testing and tracing and having follow-up. We don't have any follow-up in place. You're going to have people who are suffering from mental illness and other new comorbidities because of COVID-19. We have to have follow-up for that. We see a focus on jobs there and the economy. If we waste all of our political capital right now on getting Aunt Jemima off the shelf and pulling down statues, and we have not actually pushed through police reform, then that's going to have to be the focus in those first 90 days. And I actually am afraid that's what's going to happen. I love the momentum around BLM, but Congress is they're already making this a political thing and not really doing reform for the people right now. So I think you're going to need a president who says, hey, we didn't forget something. We got to finish this and see this through.
Yeah, you mentioned that we had to go to other countries for assistance. Many believe our position in the world has fallen. How do we engage foreign countries and leaders to repair and restore that relationship?
Oh, so one of the big jobs of the new president, and this is why I feel very confident tossing my hat in the ring at this juncture, is they're going to have to be a dynamic, world-class communicator, because we are in the middle of a PR crisis. So a couple of things that's happening that's very dangerous. You'll see a great now, well, what do you call it? It's not really a retreat, but you'll see many of our generals, many of our military now speaking out against the president. Listen, if you understand how serious a breach of protocol that is, it's a big deal for our former military leaders, people who have served in this administration, to come out now and say what they're saying. The only way they breach that protocol is if they really believe that what we currently are doing is dangerous to the nation. And you'll see someone like General Mattis, who served recently under the president, who's now saying he's never seen a more divisive president who intentionally divides us. If you're our enemy watching, you are seeing all of our weak spots on display. You are seeing that we are easily divided on party lines. We can't even decide how to deal with the pandemic as a united front, right? If you're watching, you're seeing that we're very easily manipulated in terms of our leadership. That flattery does get you somewhere with this administration. You're also understanding that we don't always mean what we say. And that's a very dangerous thing for world leaders, especially those who are not our friends, seeing. I think we're watching Russia and China, who are, we got to face it, who are elevating pretty quickly on the world scene. We just exited the World Health Organization. Well, guess who rushed into their rescue? China, the very nation that we're concerned about. And we have to make sure we're not leaving tables and letting other people create the menu. So you would see a lot of attention paid to international relations and kind of getting a lot of these talks back on track. But I think also you have to have a leader who has a balance of toughness, a balance of grit and brains, but also who can communicate effectively, who does not communicate based on their emotions in the moment, but who is able to reign over their emotions. And also you got to know that your leader is not speaking in a way just to manipulate a political base to vote for them. I believe that's what we saw when we saw the taking out of General Soleimani in Iran. I do see a couple questions we skipped over, Tony, from okay. David was asking again a question about faith, so I'll make sure we get back to that as well.
Okay.
Yeah. Let's see there. So David, I think you were asking, oh, you said describe Christ's nature. It's funny, I was reading a book today. My husband gave it to me, Life. And so it was talking about how you make decisions in leadership. And it made you go through the Bible and make this list of how did Jesus act? Like, what did he do and what didn't he do? And it was a really powerful thing to go through and look at. One of the things that I believe is critical to any leader, especially one claiming to be of the Christian faith, is do they exercise fruits of the Spirit? You know, love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. I'm singing my daughter's song in my head. She has a little head where I remember all of them. But that patience and self-control is critical. I also see a man who was not swayed by public opinion, who did not decide what to say based on whether or not it was going to be popular, who was okay with speaking hard truths in service to the people that he proclaimed the love. I think a revolutionary, the number one trait that a revolutionary must have is love. You know, that sounds, we think of revolutionary as fight, as bloody, as battle. And revolution is returning to a powerful source that always gave you life. When I think in terms of how my faith would affect me in my leadership, that means that I must serve people no matter how different they are from me. Doesn't mean that I change my convictions, I change my beliefs, but that my job is to protect and to serve all people. And if you look at Christ, you know, he hung out with the outcast. He was not always with, you know, the people who were condoned in society. And so I think that a large job of the president is to look at who has been outcast and how do we now go back and serve them. I saw someone celebrating that I talked about a specific plan, and I do unapologetically, just like I would have specific plans for others too. And so I think the rise of one thing doesn't have to mean the overthrow of another people. And that would be my calming cry, that as you hear me talk about revolution, as you hear me talking about America arising, that even though it may not look like what you thought patriotism should look like or what you think America should look like, we're really just trying to get back to what we've been saying we were: one nation under God, indivisible. So that's how it would present for me, David.
Okay. So Jay, tell us, how are you qualified, more qualified or better qualified than the other two options that we have available on the ballot?
Yeah, again, we had some of those questions last week, so I won't go too far in depth because people can go back and find them. I want to make sure I'm getting new material in here tonight. I keep saying it's not even a matter of better. It's a matter of who is right for this moment. So you think about what we're dealing with. If you have an economy that's currently lopsided, is lopsided towards big corporations. We continually bail big corporations out. We continually leave small businesses, individuals hanging. So who do you need at the helm who is not going to cozy up to big corporations, but say it's time now to also help people who have been underserved? Who has the track record for that? If you look at the current president, his background is always in favor of big corporation because he was a big corporation. He is a deal maker. The deals always favor the people who have, already have the upper hand. So if we need to have something drastically different, you can't count on him to do it. He's not wired to do it. If you look at the vice president, Joe Biden, and you look at where he is politically, he's in a position of status quo. There are people who are funding that whole campaign that he's going to have to answer to. You're looking at someone, you talk about grassroots. Someone said, we're like where the worms are. We're grassiest of the grass, right? We are literally funded by the dollars that Americans are giving us, the people who believe in what we're doing. I work and go in and out of corporations. I could be pleading to corporations for a ton of funding. But what I don't want to do is get in the White House and have you wonder if I'm making a decision because I know a certain corporation head, right? We have to now have a palate cleansing effect on our nation. You have to believe that your leader is working for you. So it's not even, is she more politically experienced than Joe Biden? No, I'm not. And I say that proudly. The last thing we need is another politician doing politics as usual. You come in with 20, 30, 40 years of experience, you're going to be beholden to doing things how you've done them for the last 20, 30, 40 years. The idea of disruption and change is not going to be something that I believe Joe Biden would lean on. I know we'll have to see who his running mate is, but that person would have to be someone who has a completely different set of convictions and would be determined to drive the country in a different direction. And then you'd have to pray that that person would have the leeway to push him to do that. And so I believe right now that if you're looking for something completely different, not just for different state, but that those ingredients we mentioned are contained within my candidacy, that's how we have to vote. If we say we really want a new American dream, if you want a new American revolution, if you want to see new results that are for all people, you're going to have to elect something different.
So we do have some questions in the chat. So we have Mary. What are your beliefs on gun control?
Yeah. Okay, so I'm from South Carolina and I live in Texas. So guns are a big deal. I know some incredible gun owners who say, we want common sense gun control. Here's what I think the issue has been. This goes back to the heart of division, what has been used to separate Americans. The average gun owner says they don't want people who shouldn't have guns in their hands running around with guns in their hands. They don't believe we all need to be running around with military style rifles. That's not why they want and want to keep their guns. So I think we have a climate now where we can pass stronger gun control legislation. And I think we can't waste that moment as well. I am convinced that what we see coming out of the mouths of the heads of the NRA and the lobby that is the NRA is not representative of the average gun owner. And I believe that those parties have not wanted us to understand that there's room for compromise. So you would see me as someone who's been a suicide prevention advocate. I also want to make sure that when we talk about gun control, we don't conflate it with mental illness and make it seem like everyone who has a mental illness is capable of this kind of violence. And that is the only time right now that we talk about mental health in this country. And I think that has to stop, because it's stigmatizing mental health illness and mental health awareness that we need. So you would see me push for greater legislation. I think that we now have a climate again where people are losing their appetite for violence. They're also losing their appetite for status quo. And we saw on the ground in New Mexico, young kids, 18-year-olds, younger than 18, who are being vocal about these things. And I think you look at the students from Parkland, and I think we have some incredible advocates by way of young people who are ready to vote in a way that we could have more change in this area.
So Irene Briggs says, what are your thoughts and plans for the Dreamers status?
So put another, if you have a more specific question as well in there to Irene, but basically I believe what makes this country great is immigrants. I mean, we can't get around it. Our founding fathers were immigrants. Well, I don't know how they look at it, but they were. And I think when we look at the progress this country has had, the success that this country is built on, it is because of immigrants. So I'm on the side of Dreamers. And I don't think that when you say that, when you talk about the power of immigration, that it has, what immigration has done for our nation, I don't think that when you say that, it also means that you believe there doesn't need to be more control at the border, so to speak. And that's one of those issues that I think, again, political parties have used to divide us. And so I think it's a powerful thing to support Dreamers, especially. I think it's a great ruling that came down in the Supreme Court, but we can't get lax. That, there are people who, that gave them temporary help, but you're going to see the current administration look to fight that. And so I'm someone who supports Dreamers. I also am someone who thinks that we now have to, broaden the conversation where immigration is concerned. Right now, we only talk pro-immigrant when it serves us, but we had some new laws recently that are coming through with, I think it's the H-1B status that affects many of our Indian immigrants right now in the technology sector. And, as we're cherry picking off our immigrants, we are actually hurting ourselves. We're going to see great American corporations that rely on many Indian immigrants here in the technology sector lose their employees, which we say we're trying to get the economy back up and running, but actually we're hurting the economy when we mess with our immigrants, when we don't protect our immigrants. We're shooting ourselves in the foot. During the pandemic, someone mentioned COVID-19. During the pandemic, there were lots of legislation passed behind our backs. So we were dealing with trying to find masks. We were watching pay being taken from agricultural workers, who majority are immigrants. And we were cutting their pay in the middle of COVID-19, sending them back to stay in shelters that weren't hygienic. We were doing these things behind Americans' backs, and we probably contributed to the resurgence when we did that. We also took away the help we needed to mine the fields, right? So plow the fields. We had all these fields that had fruit and vegetables rotting in them because we sent those immigrants away. And so I think what we're looking for now is a season of exposure. You're going to have a leader who's not afraid to call truth to power on both sides of the aisle. And I don't think you're going to get that with one party or the other. One is always going to protect the other. And so there's a lot more I could say about immigrants in general, but just so you know.
Linda asks, she says that you speak of right for this moment. Do you have plans for helping the states through the COVID-19 continuing pandemic?
Yeah, I love that.
A little bit of that earlier, but.
Yeah, a little bit. But here's what's really powerful is Linda said, do you have plans for helping the states? What we saw was the politicizing of the COVID-19 pandemic. And instead of having leadership at the top that unified the states, we saw an intentional division of the states on red and blue lines. We saw promises of aid and good connection with states who spoke highly of the president, subtle threats to states who didn't. We don't have time for that. As a result, states started fending for themselves. You saw states in the Northeast make their own coalition. That's powerful, but it's also embarrassing, right? It's powerful that states could do that. It's embarrassing that the only reason they did it was because they weren't getting support from the federal level. So here's the thing, the way that our Constitution is set up, it allows states to do just that. That is a powerful thing. And we have to be careful about federalizing everything. But I do believe that in the midst of COVID-19, you need a powerful federal response that gives strong directives from the beginning, doesn't test them out to see whether or not the base likes it or not, but gives strong directives from the beginning. One of the ways that I want to help states through this, because I believe we are resurging, one of the reasons I want to help states through this, when we come out of this in January, we'll be focusing on, I said this earlier, ongoing emergency preparation. And one of the things that we're looking to do, I would look to do, is build storehouses now in different parts of the nation that are designed for regional use, so that we have the same coalitions you see states building. We were proposing, that's what we have from the beginning in the first place, that you have now an annual checklist system. There's no reason that, I know President Trump says President Obama left the storehouses empty, but he's been in office for 3.5 years. Why weren't they refilled? So now we have to have this system of replenishing. And I believe that's actually an industry. It's an industry in disguise that we could use right now to jumpstart our economy. You could also empower the farmers who were hard hit and the growers who were hard hit by having them produce for those storehouses. I would also employ that same Defense Production Act on those companies that we bailed out. They sort of owe us. So to have them right now producing a replenishing of our inventory. When I talked about it a couple months ago, it's because I believe we would need it, but I also believe the rest of the world, if they reopened early, would have a resurgence. I want them coming to us, the producer nation, to get their supplies. So that's one of the things that I would do in the first 100 days if we were still in this moment right now of resurgence.
Okay. Mighty O, he says, will you fully pull our troops out of Afghanistan and Iraq?
Yeah, I think anybody who gives you an answer to those questions in a format like this and pretends like it is the last thing they're going to say on the matter, you should be concerned. So the one thing that I think we have used our political campaigns for is we have used foreign policy as this way to advertise whether or not we're tough or whether or not we're smart. In the meantime, those same countries are watching us and they kind of know what you're doing. I believe very strongly you can't let your right hand know what your left hand is doing. Let me tell you how I would operate in foreign policy in general. I believe we always err on the side, on a humanitarian side with a long-term view inside. If you look at what's happening right now in Syria, if you look at what's happening right now in Afghanistan, we have to admit that we've left a void. Do I believe we should have been in those places in the first place? That's the question, right? Should we have even been in these wars? When it is time to pull out, we have to do it effectively, and we cannot leave our allies hanging, because that sends a signal to our future allies, to people who are thinking of partnering us, that we can't be trusted. We can't be trusted to see things through. I think that our troops have been in the places you mentioned, Mighty O, way too long. So I think we do have to look at what is the plan to get them out, but we have to do it in a way that doesn't leave us vulnerable. We're seeing now ISIS regain stronghold in many of those places that we pulled out. We're seeing women be tortured. The ones who are in these camps, who were married to some of these men who've had a change of heart, now are being held hostage in many of these places. And so we have to be able to take responsibility for situations that we've made worse. And as we pull out and keep our troops safe, we have to make sure we're not endangering our nation in the long run as we do that. I see Mary says that her husband is a hunter. He's a wonderful, responsible Christian man. I can't wait to fill him in on your gun control ideas. Common sense is what we need. Love you. Thank you, Mary. And I think you asked about South Dakota. That was the other state that's on our list, Mary. It's one of the ones that we've got to get signatures for. Listen, we don't own a gun as a family. It is something that we have been talking about, because even here in Houston, in our very nice neighborhood, there's been an uptick of crime, very serious crime. And we don't want to be caught unable to defend ourselves. And so we don't want to strip Americans of the right to defend themselves. But I think there is something, the same way we're talking about the over-militarization of the police, we have to look at the over-militarization of our homes, and that it's resulting in some really intense crises where our school children are concerned. And school shootings are a big part of why I am so adamant about needing to do something differently about guns, even though that isn't the only reason we're having issues in the schools.
So I have another question. There's been a cry for defunding the police. Is that a real option? And what are your thoughts on that?
Listen, you're never going to see me using trendy hashtags because they get hijacked. And whatever you mean gets misinterpreted. You're going to watch President Trump very wisely. If I were his political advisor, I would tell him to do exactly what he's doing, which is to hijack that hashtag and make it mean something it doesn't mean. Here's what I believe in. I believe that we have to look at reallocating funds so that we are serving and protecting the people of communities. For instance, there was an incredible instance of more of a crisis prevention team that involved the police, mental health service, social work, and emergency health services. It was a powerful example where there was a guy who called in. It was a mental health crisis. He was threatening to shoot himself. So he had a weapon. Because he had a weapon, police had to be called, right? Because he was endangering himself as well as others. Instead, what happened was the police were there, but they pulled back. They allowed a mental health worker to go in and talk this guy down. He was able to get the weapon from that person. EMT comes in, social work comes in, finds out what his medication is, gives him medication on the spot. EMT makes sure he also has a sandwich to eat, make sure his blood sugar is right. They calm him down, and I forget where they end up taking him at the end of the day. But that system was that situation was de-escalated. Here's what we learned: de-escalation is a thing. So we need to have more focus on de-escalation techniques. We also need to surround now our community members with more options for how to de-escalate in times of crisis. So I believe more funding needs to go towards that reallocation so that also police officers are supported. I have police officer friends who say, you wouldn't believe how much time I spend going on calls that are nonviolent, that don't need me, they need somebody else. I think that's powerful. Here's what you can't get away from though. There is indeed systemic racism in our law enforcement system. There just is. The basis of policing from the very beginning was designed to protect white community from the Black community. That's the basis, that's the history of policing, whether we like it or not. Built into that history is suspicion, doubt, racism, animosity, mistrust. And so the next leader of this nation is going to have to be able to talk in a way that ensures Black America specifically, but let's not lie. These same things are happening to the Hispanic community as well. They're seeing numbers that are high as well, minority communities in general. But there is a special place, unfortunately, on systemic racism in the heart for Black people. So we're going to have a president that's not afraid to say that, who's not afraid to say, and I've been given permission from my police friends who say, nobody hates a bad cop more than a good cop. But we can't keep saying this is a bad apple problem. It's not a bad apple problem. It's a system problem. And good cops admit that as well. And I believe we do them a disservice when we pretend that this is not a systemic issue. So you'll hear me talking about needing to expose the good old boy network. We've got to probably tie consequences to pensions. You have a lot of policemen that are sticking around, not because they still have a passion for the job, because they got a passion for that pension. So they're staying in there years longer. And you have people who aren't able to be penalized. You look at a Derek Chauvin who had his knee on George Floyd's neck. That's a man who had over 14 different violations and was never penalized for them. So we have to make it easier for cops to be fired. I think we should look at systems like we have in New Jersey, where what they're doing is they are rehiring everyone, making everybody step back out and go through the hiring process all over again. You know who's not going to reapply? Your bad apples. They're not going to reapply because now we're going to be looking at those consequences differently. So I believe in reallocation of funds. I think that's important. I do not believe it's time to dismantle the police. I do not believe it's time to go completely community policing. Here's why. You know what was community policing? Ahmaud Arbery was community policing. Trayvon Martin was community policing. We have to be careful that in our anger, we don't propose things that can be manipulated in the long run. If you want to see an increase of people in neighborhoods killing neighbors, then you tell them there's no more police. You want to see criminals come out in droves, you tell them there's no more police. And you're going to give people an excuse to use those guns we were just talking about for everybody they think is trespassing. You know, I live in a predominantly white community, and I know that many of the people here don't even know there's a Black family in this house, right? So the last thing I want is to be out in my front yard, somebody not having seen me before thinking that I'm trespassing. So we've got to be very careful, and our solutions must be long-term. But you will see in a couple of days now a release of more of those police reforms that I'm looking at. And you better believe I'm working with community leaders and the good apples, so to speak. I think we should be talking about good apples in a bad system more than bad apples in a good system, which I don't think is the truth.
All right. So Mary put a comment up and she said, please let me know when you're in South Dakota. I want to help. So Yay. Will that calendar be posted where events where people can know where you are, where you're traveling?
Yeah, and we will tag you, Mary, right now. I know somebody from my team will hit you up and let you know, because we will need help. I think South Dakota doesn't have a ton of signatures. That I shouldn't say a ton. They're all a ton, but it's not like 30,000 signatures. But we found that as many boots on the ground that we have helping us will be really powerful. So we thank you in advance for that.
We also have Natalie. She says, you've mentioned you value life from the womb to the tomb.
Yeah.
Can you flesh out in terms of principles and policies?
Yes, Natalie, and put back in there, are you looking specifically to know where I stand on abortion, which is what I'm going to assume. So I'm going to launch into that. And then if you have anything else differently that you want me to specify, please ask it. So you're not going to find anyone more passionate about life. I believe in the value of life. I believe that unborn children are a gift. My concern is that in the amount of abortions that we have committed, I always say we, because I just don't believe that we get to be innocent in almost any situation. We have perpetuated systemic racism whenever we've allowed it or stayed silent about it. Where I stand on abortion is that I believe that every life has value. So if you have value, Tony, and you brought impact to this world, that must mean that the lives that we've lost to abortion, we've lost something. Did we lose a cure to COVID-19? Did we lose another Martin Luther King? Did we lose a Gloria Steinem in abortion? Now, where I focus, if we're talking about just that issue, which is what I'm suspecting, if I focus only on the overturning of laws, I feel like you waste time. I feel like it's symbolic. So the way that I want to deal with being a proponent for life is that I want to focus on reproductive possibility. We got enough advocates out there fighting for reproductive justice, making sure that a woman can have abortion. I want to make sure that women who want to have children can carry them to term. So you're going to hear me focusing on maternal health care. There are too many Black women dying in birthing rooms. Why is that? The VA has a high rate in terms of infertility. Why is that? You're also going to hear me talk about, if you want to decrease the abortion rate, all of my pro-life friends, if you're seriously pro-life, first of all, you got to care about not just the baby in the womb. I need you to care about those living, breathing babies who now need assistance. I need you to care about the babies who are dying, maybe at the border. I need you to care about a George Floyd. You don't get to pick and choose. That's why I say from the womb to the tomb. But back to abortion, I want to focus on decreasing the numbers of abortion. Good news is that for the last 30 years, there's been a decrease in the number of abortions. That's something to celebrate. Bad news, it's still commonplace. Here's where I want to help. The number one reason we have abortion, it's not rape, it's not incest, it's not fetal abnormalities. It's not. That's what we hear about because it's much easier to sensationalize things. The number one reason that women are choosing abortion, drum roll please, is because it's an unintended pregnancy. Just wasn't what they planned. Most women who have had abortions already have 1 to 2 children. So one of the reasons they're giving is lack of a partner, problems with that partner, victimization by a partner. So you'll see us focus on helping women who have been victimized. where you'll see us focus on sex trafficking. Another one reason that women give is loss of livelihood. Also, discrimination in the workplace. If I have this baby and I'm at the top of my career, am I going to be penalized for being pregnant? Am I going to be demoted for being pregnant? And I don't even have equal pay in the first place. So if I, as a single woman, go through with this pregnancy, can I afford it? So you'll see me talk a lot about pay equity. You'll see me talk a lot about equality in the workplace, paid family leave. And you'll see me talk a lot about welfare reform as well. Right now, if you're on welfare, you get penalized for having a man in the home, for having a father in the home. You get penalized for having two incomes. Yet you say you want people to work their way out of poverty. You want them to pull themselves up by the bootstraps. So people who are on assistance who are having abortions already have children, but don't want any more because they can't afford them. So you'll see us focusing on all the reasons that cause women to have an abortion out of victimization, loss of livelihood, loss of job status, and equal pay. And you don't hear other pro-life advocates talking about that. I don't use the term pro-life. I don't use the term pro-choice. I feel like both of those terms have been hijacked. I use the word pro-human. If you're serious about life, you got to care about it from the womb to the tomb. If you're serious about choice, you got to make sure you're helping women be able to have the choice to carry to term as well. So that's where my focus is there. If there's anything else, let me know. How can we better support mothers? Oh my God, Natalie, thank you. That's the stuff. You know, working mothers right now are being hit disproportionately by COVID. We talk about unemployment. Women right now, they don't have childcare, but we're having to stay home. We can't work because we have the kids at home. So that next stimulus, if there is one, which is a whole nother discussion, Tony, because that's adding to the deficit. But if there is another stimulus, it needs to focus on targeted efforts like childcare. We had healthcare workers that didn't have childcare, right? So I think there are programs that we need to be putting in place that help mothers be mothers and help them also be mothers who also work, mothers who also take care of dependents, mothers who also. And so I think, to me, that's what women's rights and women's empowerment should now begin to focus on. I think abortion has had a lot of advocacy. So you're going to see my advocacy be on reproductive possibility, because I don't hear enough about that. You'll also hear about reform to the adoption and the foster care system that I think are depriving our children of homes. Right now, it's very hard, very difficult to adopt in this country. And it's very difficult to foster and foster in a way that's culturally appropriate for the kids that are in the foster care system. So those are other ways of helping families and helping mothers.
Okay. That was Natalie, and you did answer her question. So one more question. We don't have any more questions in the chat, but we have a couple more minutes. So tell us, what's your superpower? And how will you serve? How will you help that? How will that help you serve as our president of the United States?
That's good. I think it's a combination of the ability to see where that commonality is, where the common ground is, mixed with the ability to communicate it effectively. So what we saw on the ground in New Mexico, we heard often people say, I've never thought about it like that. And then they signed the petition. We had Trump supporters signing for us. Like, come on, Matt, listen.
That's amazing.
I just pat myself on the back for that one. And it only came though after listening. So it's the ability to cause people to listen in differently. Can you paint a new picture other than all those predetermined images that have been force-fed to us? So whenever we would run into, let's say, a hardcore Trump supporter, he or she would spout back to us rehearsed bullet points. Well, you can't vote blue because that's socialism. You can't vote that way because this. And it was like hard line rehearsed. Same thing on the other side. We've got to get that guy out. Don't split the vote. It's like everybody had the same little parroted bullet points. Nobody was thinking for themselves, listening for themselves. And so I feel like my superpower has been that when I'm able to lay things out, people who normally wouldn't see eye to eye, normally wouldn't agree, normally wouldn't be in the same room, let alone same political party, are finding that we have something in common. And I think that is the kind of voice we're going to need in the era that we're in right now. I see some more questions popping up.
Yeah, a couple more just popped in. So Consuela says, I'm voting for you. So that's awesome.
Yeah.
But then she also asked, do you have any independent candidates that are running against you?
Yeah, it's hard out here for an independent, Consuela. There are others. There are others, and some are not seriously running. Some are doing what we call like a symbolic run. They just want to say, we're here. We want you to hear this voice. So as far as we know, there's not another independent who is seriously running and believes that they could win and believes that they could sway enough people to vote for them. There is Jo Jorgensen, a libertarian candidate who is running and will be on your ballot because she runs for the Libertarian Party and they already have ballot status. Why am I daring to tell you about other competitors? Because there are a lot. It's because the only way a democracy flourishes is with varied choices. I don't want to be another voice telling you, I'm the only option you have. Be scared of the other two, vote for me. What we say is look over what I'm saying, listen to my heart, see if it resonates with yours, and then vote accordingly. If we had everybody who told us they liked what I was saying, but they believed that I was the right person, but if all of those people were to actually vote for me, we would win in a landslide, not just, barely make a dent. We'd win in a landslide because we'd have people from both sides of the political spectrum casting their vote for something they actually believed in.
Okay. So that's all our questions we have. Let's see. Wait. There's one more. Consuela says, I'm going to vote my interest regardless of it. Letting the other candidate win. My vote is my protest.
That's good. That's it. And your vote is your power. And what we're telling people is this is not just a protest vote. If everybody who voted how we feel, how they felt, and saw that their beliefs line up with ours, that's a real vote. A wasted vote to me is voting for the lesser of two evils, voted just to get something out, not to get something in. That to me is a weighted vote. So thank you, Consuela, and thank you for spreading the word. I'm also seeing a pitch here. We are selecting electors. If you want to make history with us and be one of our electors, you're going to DM. I see Loretta Small says DM her. We may even put info at operationrestoration2020.com. Email us there. What an elector does is when I win the popular vote in your state, it's a formality at that point because that state then gives all of their electors to the winner of the popular vote. But we have to have our electors on call. So when I win in your state, you would go up to the state capitol and cast your official electoral vote. You'd be a member of that mysterious electoral college, and it would officially say that your state goes to me. So if that interests you, if you'd like to be a part of that kind of formal ceremony that comes with the presidential process, let us know. We're vetting people. We got to make sure you're really going to vote for us and not sneak in there and vote for Kermit the Frog or something like that. But if it interests you, let us know. We'd love to have you as a part of our electoral team.
One last one. Irene says, will you or do you have Secret Service protection?
I don't yet, Irene. You have to be, as morbid as it sounds, there has to be probably a threat as an independent, as someone who's not in the major party. The major parties get them assigned to them right away. As soon as the public begins to know about us and we have more of a public following, when they start polling and I'm polling in that, I would get Secret Service protection. We did have kind of our first soft threat come through. So if I turn that into the FBI, maybe that would hurry up our Secret Service. But right now we have our own protection that we travel with and that we provide for ourselves to make sure that we're safe, especially in public settings. So don't come for us because it's not going to turn out good. Yeah. But we are protected on our own, Irene, but we don't have the official service yet.
Jade, any last remarks you want to make? And we want to thank you definitely for coming out and being open to everyone's questions and answers session. So do you have any final words that you want to leave?
Everybody, thank you, Diana. I believe in you and what you stand for. Let's restore this nation. That's it. What people are resonating with is an authenticity in the message. I literally don't I don't have anything to win here. People keep wondering if this is a career move, and I keep saying it's the opposite of a career move. Take it from me. It's not a lucrative thing. It's a costly thing. It does not increase your popularity. It makes you suddenly a very not liked person. And that's hard for me. I'm used to everybody loving everything I say. And now that's not the case. So there's no personal gain in this except for the reward of stepping into a moment that I feel I'm supposed to step into. And I think the lesson that I'm trying to model as I do this is that if any of you out there are sitting on something you were supposed to say yes to, it looks unlikely, it looks impossible, it's scary, you don't know what people are going to think about you, I dare you to say yes to it. It'll be the most rewarding experience of your life. And I would also say that those of you who have more questions, we've been really wanting to release our policy always by video, but we know that you have more questions about these stances. So you'll see more of our stances released in written form on the website, and we'll go back and add video as we can so that you can share the videos that you resonate with. But always let us know what the questions are on your mind. If you're watching this in the replay, leave questions for us and we'll do our best to either answer them there or to put them on our video as a policy video. So I just thank everybody for tuning in and can't implore you enough to share the word. We know that word of mouth is going to be huge for us. And what we noticed is that when we share the word, people resonate with what we're saying almost every single time. So help us by doing that. But thank you so much for tuning in.
All righty. Thank you, Jade.
All right.
Now that you've had the chance to hear from Jade, you've heard her introduce it to your network. Host a virtual Meet the Candidate by texting MTC, that's Mary Tom Cat, at 33777. We invite you to join us in July for our series we're calling Women for Restoration. We want to know what restoration in this country would look like for you. These events start on Saturday, July 11th at 10 a.m. Central Time. Check out the events listed in our Operation Restoration Facebook page or our website for all details. And if you want to learn more about this campaign, how to get involved, learn more about Jade's policies and plans, go to operationrestoration2020.com. And we thank you. Have a good night.